Let me guess, your coursework's a real mess and needs sorted out. Or it's messier and less prunes than you initially think. Get rid of complacency. Let's improve your analytical coursework. Stay tuned. Get high marks with Schofield on Shakespeare.
A reminder of how it is marked. AO1 is out of 12. At the top end, this means that you've chosen the perfect quotations for the question and the text, and you have embedded them seamlessly. Your subsequent analysis is insightful and interesting, and you keep on bringing this back to the essay title. AO2 is out of 18. At the top end, your analysis is technical, precise, and insightful. Once again, this part of the mark scheme emphasises the importance of choosing the right quotations, whilst you also need to ensure that you include some structural analysis. Your section exploring poetry is likely to lend itself particularly well to this. Overall, you need to demonstrate a sophisticated understanding of the text as a whole. Note that the mark scheme wants discriminating and assured use of textual references and examples. Implicit within this is the importance of contextualizing your points and quotations. Don't just plonk quotations without explaining briefly what is happening in the text at a particular point. Your teachers would have given you guidance on how to structure your essay and individual paragraphs. The main focus of this video will be on how to improve individual paragraphs that you've already written, rather than make superficial tweaks. I will use an actual pupil paragraph which answers the question, explore the presentation of personal relationships in The Necklace, The Story of an Hour, and Disabled. The pupil paragraph has been taken from the section exploring The Necklace. Read or reread this text now. It will appear on screen at 4-second intervals. Here's a pupil paragraph exploring The Necklace then. Remember that the question is asking you to explore the presentation of personal relationships. For The Necklace, this would be the relationship between Monsieur and Madame Loisel. The relationship between the Loisels reflects the inequality between men and women in the late 19th century. Throughout the text, Maupassant presents a relationship typical of the late 19th century in which the man has a disproportionate amount of power. This is highlighted in Women Have Neither Rank Nor Class. This main clause represents how women are dependent on their husband, not just for basic necessities like somewhere to live and food to eat, but also their status in terms of what class they are and whether they are looked upon with admiration and respect or detest. Another way in which Maupassant shows the struggles of women in the 19th century is she had no dowry, no expectation, no means of meeting someone rich. This tricolon tells us that she is unhappy in her relationship and that it was not her first choice but rather a backup, as it is quite obvious to the reader that she wanted to meet someone rich. This also shows how their relationship is without love or emotion for the most part, and that it was an arranged thing which she had no say or part in. Another time in the story where the husband tries to make the best of what they have is when he said, "What about the dress you wear for the theatre?" This is not taken seriously by his wife, and as soon as he said it, his words died in his throat. This alliteration shows the poverty they are in, and the fact the husband is trying unsuccessfully to cover it up. Later on, the wife is very thoughtful and thinks about how her life could have turned out if she had married a rich man, and often she dreamt of it. This anaphora tells us that she had major ambitions for life, but they are currently unfulfilled, and she hopes that one day she may be able to marry a rich man who could give her the lifestyle she wants. So what do you think of this paragraph? What works well? What needs to be improved? Time to dissect and discuss. Press pause now. Let's take each quartile in turn. Some good things here, no? There is a clear topic sentence answering the question. There is insight into the context with the pupil rightly drawing attention to patriarchal systems which restrict opportunities for women. The quotation is an interesting one and is clearly relevant to a question asking you to explore personal relationships. Here, there's some analysis of the quotation with some basic technical terminology used as seen in this main clause. So this is okay, isn't it? But is it grade 9 level yet? No. On a superficial level, there are some grammatical issues. How many of you spotted the catastrophic apostrophe errors? Apostrophe should not be used for plurals. Meanwhile, what about this weird comma? And the wrong word class in detest. To detest is a verb, whereas admiration and respect are both nouns. So it should be. But let's now think more carefully about the analysis. Does the necklace really present such a simplistic dichotomy in that women are either treated with admiration and respect or detested? Additionally, could the quotation be contextualized more clearly? Keep rereading how your quotations have been used within the rest of the text and within individual sentences and paragraphs. The second paragraph on screen certainly emphasises the powerlessness of lower middle class women. But the subsequent quotation about beauty, grace and charm does suggest that women can gain some attention and acclaim by charming others with their personal appearance and by appearing elegant. Here's how I might improve this opening quartile. In the first half of the text, the relationship between the Loisels reflects the inequalities between men and women in the late 19th century. The husband seems reasonably content with his life and work, whilst the wife seems bored and dissatisfied as she stays at home with nothing to do. Maupassant highlights the power imbalance typical of the time when he states women have neither rank nor class. This main clause is shocking for the modern reader and implicitly highlights the fact that in the late 19th century, a marriage would determine both a woman's social standing and her standard of living. In contrast to modern ideals, this implies that women would predominantly see marriage as an opportunity to improve their lives, rather than satisfy any romantic ideals or cravings. Note how I have extended the topic sentence to give even more detailed insight into the question. I've also completely rewritten the analysis to avoid any oversimplification. My phrasing is more formal. Rather than saying women are dependent on their husband not just for basic necessities like somewhere to live and food to eat, but also their status, I write, the main clause is shocking for the modern reader and implicitly highlights the fact that in the late 19th century, a marriage would determine both a woman's social standing and her standard of living. Here's the pupil's second quartile. Some thoughts. Is this topic sentence sharply focused on the question, i.e. exploring the presentation of personal relationships? What about this analysis? Can we say that she was definitely unhappy in her relationship because prior to getting married she had no dowry, no expectation, no means of meeting someone rich? Similarly, just because you didn't have a dowry, does that mean automatically that any subsequent relationship will be without love or emotion? And are you happy with the phrase arranged thing? The mark scheme asks for discriminating use of textual references and examples. Is it discriminating to choose a quotation relating to Mademoiselle's setup prior to marriage in order to explore her subsequent marriage? Certainly it's relevant background information. But of course, given that in the coursework as a whole, you're exploring 3 texts, you do need to select your quotations from each one oh so carefully. Let me have a go then at improving this section. Note that once again, I'm not just tweaking, I'm thinking deeply and rewriting some sentences in full. However, the problem for Mademoiselle is that her own background and comparative poverty effectively negate the possibility of a happy marriage. Maupassant reveals that she had no dowry, no expectation, no means of meeting some rich, important man. This asyndetic tricolon starkly and breathlessly confirms that she has no chance of finding a husband who will be able to give her the luxurious, comfortable married life she feels she merits and deserves. She felt that she was intended for a life of refinement and luxury, thus meaning that dissatisfaction with Monsieur Loisel will be inevitable, irrespective of his individual qualities as a man and a husband. Note that my topic sentence is more sharply focused and phrased in a more precise, sophisticated way. I have also quoted correctly and extended the original quotation by a few words. Compare the analysis. In the original version, the pupil wrote that the tricolon tells us that she is unhappy in her relationship. This is not technically correct, as the tricolon no dowry, no expectation, no means of meeting someone rich referred to Madame Loisel's status prior to marriage. We know what the pupil's trying to say here, but it needs to be phrased more carefully, as I do when I suggest that dissatisfaction with Madame Monsieur Loisel will be inevitable, irrespective of his individual qualities as a man and a husband. This is the 3rd quartile of the paragraph. The issue I have here is that it doesn't really seem to follow on from the previous section. The argument shifts from saying that the marriage was an arranged thing which he had no say or part in, which isn't quite true, to talking about the husband making the best of the relationship. This shift is too abrupt, and I would prefer not only a more seamless shift, but also a more explicit focus on the question, Maupassant's presentation of personal relationships. I think it's also worth looking at the quotation choices in this paragraph as a whole. The first one is from lines 7 to 8, the second from lines 2 to 3. The third is from lines 54 to 55, whilst the fourth is from line 17. Now, do quotations need to be in chronological order? Not necessarily. Another issue we have here is that the necklace is a particularly long text, and you do need to show detailed insight into it as a whole, which is likely to require a range of quotations from different sections. However, the overall impression that I have here is of rather haphazard quotation choices, of perhaps the pupil thinking up quotations as he goes along as opposed to planning a carefully structured argument. It might be worth you reflecting on your own quotation choices now for your coursework. Are they the best ones? Are they in the right order? And does each quotation and point lead seamlessly onto the next one? And so, returning to this third quartile, my sense is that the quality of argument, organisation and insight has weakened considerably. Plus, there's the considerable irritation of the missing question mark that I know all of you would have spotted. In addition, has the quotation been contextualised? What is the dress going to be used for? Has the interesting quotation, his words died in his throat, which uses powerful personification, been explored? Is this narrative rather than analytical? Does it actually answer the question? And so, remember, this is how my previous improved paragraph ended. I would continue. Their relationship is characterised by Monsieur Loisel being blithely and unthinkingly cheerful, and Madame Loisel yearning fruitlessly. She dreamt of silent antechambers hung with oriental tapestries. She dreamt of great drawing rooms dressed with old silk. The anaphora highlights the enormous discrepancy between the drab monotony of Madame Loisel's life and surroundings and her hopes and dreams. She desires, and feels she deserves, exotic, luxurious, sophisticated furnishings in her home, and that home should be spacious and roomy. The fact that her husband has not been able to provide this is implicitly a source of unspoken resentment, something he singularly fails to pick up on. Note that I am sharply focused on the question, the relationship, within the topic sentence, and I aim to use more lively vocabulary such as blithely. Note also the level of detail I go into when analysing the quotation. Madame Loisel deserves and expects exotic, luxurious, sophisticated furnishings and a much larger home. And note the way I then link this back to the question. Maupassant's presentation of personal relationships. Returning to the fourth quartile, this actually references the same quotation I have inserted into the previous section. However, this error will make all of us despair. What should it be? Of course. But is it really true that when Madame Loisel is fantasizing about a fabulously luxurious home, that she is being thoughtful? Is this the right word? And is there any sense that she may one day be able to marry a rich man? Is this ever suggested as a realistic possibility in the text? Remember that this is the late 19th century. Whilst death may have been slightly more likely, divorce emphatically wasn't. And the impression I have is that Monsieur Loisel seems the sort of man likely to complacently tuck into splendid stew for many, many more years to come. Here's how I would have concluded this paragraph. For this is a relationship characterised by poor communication and misunderstandings. This is shown most obviously when Monsieur Loisel delightedly brandishes an invitation to an important work social event, only for his wife to toss the invitation peevishly onto the table and mutter. He expected his wife to be thrilled, but instead is taken aback as his wife initially seems dismissive and irritated, as exemplified by the adverb peevishly. The husband has no concept of the extent to which his wife is dissatisfied with their lives. So have a read through the rewritten paragraph in full. What is required to access the higher grades? How should you approach the improvement process? So, what are the key things to remember when proofreading your coursework? Read them through on screen now.
This has been a Schofield on Shakespeare production, helping you prune, tidy, snip, cut your GCSE analytical coursework. Many thanks for watching.